Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be working a little bit of chair mobility. So have a chair handy. We're going to start with our staff or dowel rod for some shoulder mobility. Then we'll bring out the chair. Then we're going to get on the floor. Focus of today is going to be largely neck and shoulders, like kind of wringing out the fascia of the neck and upper shoulders all the way out to the elbows and hands. So hopefully it'll feel nice and good by the time we get to the end. So let's get started. I'm going to start with some light shoulder mobility. I'm going to get a grip shoulder width apart. I want to have this nice solid grip with the wrists straight. I want to avoid bending or breaking of the wrists, so I want to keep those wrists solid and straight. Imagining that we're trying to bend or break the staff in two. So at the same time, I've got a nice solid straight wrist. I'm also spiraling through those elbow pits, feeling those elbow pits spiraling up towards the ceiling. And I want that spiral to be down at the wrist, again, like we're trying to break the staff, but also up in the shoulders, feeling those shoulder blades packing down and back on the rib cage at the same time. Then we're going to get a little bit of a scoop in the pelvis so that we got a little bit of tension in our lower core, and we're simply finding that nice range. How far can you bring your elbows towards your ears? Squeeze at the end. Inhale, soften. Exhale, squeeze. I want to go extra slow since we're starting with the shoulders to make sure that the shoulders are moving well without pain. I tend to have some shoulder pain in my left shoulder, so I always want to move extra slow. I can feel that left shoulder is a little tighter than my right. And with these, we'll work our reps up to 10, up to 20 reps. Nice, slow squeeze on the exhale. I want to avoid extending at the rib cage. I don't want that rib cage jutting out, so I want to keep that light scoop in the pelvis, which will help keep the rib cage packed down and towards your hips. Also, watch out for the head wanting to tilt or drop forward as you pull. We're trying to keep a nice tall spine. Next, we're going to bring the staff behind us with our palms facing backwards. Reaching and extending down, again, nice straight wrist, and continuing to bend the staff, but bending it away from the body. So as we get that spiral through the elbows, notice how that opens up your chest towards the wall in front of you and up towards the ceiling. And from here, we're lifting elbows up towards the ceiling, squeeze at the end. Inhale as you soften, exhale as you squeeze. Again, 10 up to 20 reps, nice and slow. The slower you go, the more you're going to be able to squeeze at that top range of the movement. I don't want to be quick. I'm not throwing my elbows up. I'm lifting, squeezing, holding, and then relaxing as I inhale, exhale, lift and squeeze. Since we're doing higher reps, you're probably going to feel some fatigue in the shoulders. As you're lifting, also continue to feel that chest open up towards the wall in front, and keeping that nice tall spine through the head. Again, I don't want to drop the head forward as we're lifting. Then we're going to flip our hands the opposite direction on the staff, continuing to bend the staff away from the body and doing the exact same thing, lifting elbows and squeezing up towards the ceiling. As you get this squeeze, with our palms facing forward, this may elicit a little bit more stretch through the front of the arm, front of the shoulder, into the bicep. Notice if it's different on the left side compared to the right side. That's actually a very important tell of some things going on in the shoulder and the neck area that I want to pay attention to. More likely to feel that in the front bicep if you tend to have some impingement pain. Lifting your arm up towards the side. Again, nice slow squeeze on that exhale. Doing 10 to 20 reps. As we're getting towards the end of these, you can start to bend a little bit at the waist and see if that frees up a little bit more range of your lift of your elbows. But again, watch out for that head wanting to drop down. I want to keep that chest nice and open. So we're going to move our grip to a nice wide grip, getting into our slow skin cat. So this is where I'm just seeing, can we bring the staff all the way up and around? But I want to make sure that this is not painful. So not everybody's going to be able to get all the way from hip to the back hip and back. So I want to go only as far as we're able to go without pain. If all you're able to do is bringing it up to about here, then you're just bringing it all the way back down. Exhale, bringing it all the way back up and squeezing into that end range. If you're able to go further, go nice and slow. Make sure it's smooth. I don't want to walk one arm and then the other arm through. I want to see how far can we go evenly with both arms. If you're able to go all the way through, great. If not, working on this every day will hopefully start to bring in more range so that you can get further. And it just takes time. Again, we'll work up to 5 or doing 10 reps on this one. Nice and slow. If you're able to get full range as you're coming up and around, you can work on reaching up through the arms, opening up that chest. I'm trying to draw movement out, like I'm trying to get my shoulders to pull out of the socket. They're not actually pulling out of the socket, but I'm reaching out in a way, feeling the chest open up as I move the staff through. And I want to keep that action as I bring it back. And we'll go ahead and set the staff off to the side. We're going to pull out our chair. So I like a folding chair or dining room chair, something that's nice and flat. You got a curve in your chair, tends to make these movements a little bit more challenging. We can work with a curved chair. I also want to avoid backrests in a chair because it kind of prevents me from being able to move. From the chair, I'm letting my hands come down to the bottom of the seat so that I can grab and pull my shoulder blades down. I want to depress my shoulder blades as much as possible. So I'm pulling down actively to keep my shoulders down, getting as much length availability in the neck. Getting nice and tall in the spine. We're going to do some neck mobility to start. So we're going to, starting with checking our blind spots. Slowly turning the head to the right, squeezing to the end range lightly, and then bringing it all the way to the other side, squeezing slowly. Inhale as you bring your head to center, exhale as you rotate. And I want to make sure we're going extra slow on this. Notice how far you're able to get your chin and your nose towards the outside edge of your shoulder on the left side compared to the right side. Does one side feel tighter and more restricted? And with each one, we're seeing if we can squeeze a little further into the range of motion. I'm saying squeeze because I don't want to use momentum. I want to feel my muscles stretching, contracting, lengthening as I move into that end range, not going to pain. This should not be a painful movement, especially on the neck. I want to make sure that we are keeping pain very, very low. A mild, slight discomfort at the very max. And we'll bring our head back to center, and now we're going to get into our windshield wipers, letting the ears drop from one shoulder up to the middle, back across. Continuing to keep the hands pulling the shoulders down. I want to avoid my shoulders getting soft and starting to float up towards my ears. So I'm really actively using my hands to pull the shoulders back. And let's also add in, Feel the elbow pits spiraling out so that you feel that chest kind of opening up and expanding towards the ceiling. So as we're dropping one ear towards the shoulder and then back to the other side, I'm lightly dropping. I'm not trying to push my ear down. I just want to kind of feel that light drop so I feel the stretch on the other side of the neck. Notice the difference in tension on one side compared to the other. And then we're going to add to this. As you drop your left ear towards your left shoulder, imagine you got a piece of string attached to your right earlobe, and that string is lifting, pulling your ear up towards the ceiling. So you want to get this traction stretch through the side of the neck. Again, it's a light lift. Let your head come back to neutral. Drop the right ear, and now left ear lightly getting lifted up. Going back and forth. Again, notice the difference on the right side compared to the left side. Does one side stretch more? Does one side feel like it has more range of motion? You may find that the side that has more range of motion also feels like it stretches more, which might make you question, is it stretching more because it's actually tighter, or is it stretching more because it's able to stretch and it's the other side that might actually be tighter? You're just not able to move it enough to elicit a stretch. I'm noticing my left side does not move as well as my right. I have more stretch on my right, but I have less quality. It's harder for me to lift that ear up. So I'm guessing that it's my left side of my neck that's actually a little tighter as far as shortened, having trouble getting the length. Next, we're going to get into our glide. So in this one, I want to keep my cheekbones on the same level, still active with our hands, pulling shoulders down. And we're seeing if we can feel the head glide across. So as I want to move head unit just as a glide. I don't want my head to rotate, and I don't want it to tilt or tilt and rotate at the same time. This movement can be really hard to do if you don't have a mirror or a camera that you're able to look in at this as you're doing it. And I only want to take this movement as far as I can, maintaining that perfect glide. Again, no rotation, no tilt to the head. I want to keep those cheekbones on the same plane. You may find that you're able to glide well in one direction, and that when you go the other direction, your head wants to tilt or rotate more, and it's hard to glide. Really, really valuable, helpful information to notice where you move well, especially at the neck. The neck is such a huge factor when it comes to our movement. And last, we'll do some shallow neck rolls. So I want to stay shallow, I don't want to get deep. Allowing the chin to drop down towards the chest. Then we're going to slowly roll the right ear to the right shoulder. And then let our gaze go up to the ceiling. Again, staying shallow, not going deep. Left ear to the left shoulder, and then chin back to chest. And we're going to keep going in that direction. We're starting off with 4 points. Ear to shoulder, chin to chest, ear to shoulder, gaze to ceiling. But as we're going through, nice and slowly, start to turn those 4 points, that square, more into a circle. See if you can smooth out the edges. Nice big inhales in through the nose, exhale out through the mouth. And as you're getting into it, you can slowly go a little deeper, making sure that you're avoiding pain. Notice if there's any kind of crackle, crunchiness. If so, as long as it is not painful, then I want to de-crackle the crackle. If it's painful, then I want you to back off and not go so deep. And then we're going to reverse directions. As we reverse directions, though, I want to come back to our 4 points. I don't want to assume that this next direction is going to be non-painful. So chin to chest, left ear to the left shoulder, gaze to ceiling, right ear to the right shoulder, and then chin to chest. Nice inhale in through the nose, Exhale out through the mouth and slowly smoothing out the circle, the edges of that square, and turning it into a circle. And if you feel comfortable, non-painful, you can start to let it go a little deeper. Now, very interesting, I want to make, how it feels going in one direction is going to be different than how it feels in the other direction. So I want to assess those. When I was moving in the first direction, I didn't have any pain. It actually felt pretty smooth. But when I reversed directions, I got one particular point, especially coming from head back, rotating towards my right side. It's a little bit uncomfortable. Not as smooth of range of motion. My neck is not quite mobile enough to make that less, not painful. So tightness on that left side of the neck, probably not allowing me to get movement into the right side of my neck. So again, really important things, helpful things to kind of take note of when we're doing our neck mobility. All right, so now we're going to get into hands. We're going to spread our hands super, super wide, letting them drop down to our side. I want to get fingers, the pinky and the thumb spread as wide apart as possible. A nice flat pancake. I don't want curves. I don't want our hands like tilted or crunched in together. Spread out wide. Palms are facing forward. And we're just simply going to work on spiraling, kind of doing our bowls of soup from this low position. So we're going to internally spiral both hands as far as they will go. But I don't want to lose position of our spine or our shoulder. So I'm not allowing my shoulder blades to round forward. I'm simply spiraling up into the shoulder socket. Seeing how far can you externally spiral, keeping those hands spread wide. How far can you internally spiral? How does this feel on the right shoulder compared to the left shoulder? Is one side a little clunky? Is it grindy? Is it painful? Do you have more or less range of motion? After about 5 or 10 of these, we're going to bring arms straight out in front and do the exact same thing, spiraling all the way up and spiraling all the way in. I want to see if we can feel this stretch down into the forearms, through the hands, and all the way up to the shoulder, right at the ball, where the ball of the humerus fits into the socket of the shoulder, of the scapula. And again, notice the difference of how this feels, right side to left side. Next, we're going to bring arms straight out across, out to our side with our palms up. And now we're going to go one side at a time, spiraling one hand. As that hand spirals back up, then we get to spiral the other hand. And on this one, I want to kind of have them spiraling oppositionally at the same time. So as one hand spirals in, the other one's opening. And again, I want to keep the movement at the shoulder, the ball and socket to start with. At least for 5 up to 10 reps. Really notice how difficult is it to open one hand compared to the other. Do you have more external rotation on the right side compared to the left side? Do you have more internal rotation on one side compared to the other? Now I want to start to allow the shoulder blades to free. As I spiral in, I'm going to let that shoulder start to round over the top. We're only working one side at a time, so as one side rotates down, the other one is opening up. This is going to start to make your spine move a little bit. One shoulder rolls over, trying to get as much movement through that shoulder as you can. As you're doing this, as you spiral, imagine that you're Stretch Armstrong and you're seeing if your fingers can reach away to the walls and get long through the fingertips as you're spiraling. We'll let our hands down. We're going to shake them out a little bit. We're going to bring our hands back out to the side, and I want to kind of keep our spread hands. But now we're going to get into our pelvic tilts, and we're going to bring this into a seated cat-cow. So hands are just out to the side to start with. We're going to work on scooping the pelvis and then tilting it forward. As I scoop, I want to keep my shoulders over my hips, which will round my spine. It'll allow me to kind of get a nice cat into my cow, but I'm not adding a whole lot of movement into the upper back or shoulders. See if we can feel this movement just at the belly and low back. We're going to bring in our breath. Inhale as your pelvis is tilting forward. It's going to get a big sway in your low back as your belly kind of distends forward. And as you exhale, draw your navel into your spine as you scoop. See if you can feel some nice stretch into that low back. With each one, see if you can scoop a little bit more to get as much of that mobility into that low back. As you come forward, let that belly open up as much as possible, as long as we're not getting into any pinch or pain in the low back. And then we're going to start to add in our shoulders again. So as you scoop, let your hands move forward as you internally spiral the palms. Notice how that rounds the shoulders forward. I want to feel that stretch through the low back all the way up into the upper back. As we bring it back into our cow, let the hands drop to your side and spiral the palms open, feeling that nice opening up through the top of the chest, lifting you up towards the ceiling. As you inhale, exhale, hands go forward, spiraling in. Try to keep your eyes on the wall in front of you. Pick a point on the wall so that your head is not dropping as you're reaching forward. Nice. Now, we're going to bring an ankle up to the knee, and we're into a nice little figure four position. And I want to play with the knee that is elevated, starting out with just doing some simple hip mobility, actively reaching that knee downward towards the floor and then letting it soften back up towards the ceiling. Just exhale as you squeeze. I'm squeezing down, inhale, allowing it to come back up. It's going to work deep into that hip socket. It's subtle, but it can be a lot, especially if you have tight hips. Notice how high this knee is sitting on this side, because this is a good comparison for hip mobility. So after we do 5, 10 reps on this side, let's go ahead and switch to the other side. So I've had 5 knee surgeries on my right knee. So when my right knee is here, you can see how much higher my right knee sits compared to my left knee. My left knee has much more mobility. It sits a lot lower comparatively. It's one of my significant imbalances in my body. So on this other side, actively reaching that knee down and then letting it soften. Doing the exact same thing. Notice the difference of how this feels into that hip. Is one side tighter, more restricted? Is one side a little painful? We'll make sure we're avoiding pain. In 5, 10 reps, and then we're going to switch back across. As we switch back, I want to now actively reach down and keep it actively pressed down. Keep that tension in the hip. And now we're going to come into some forward fold. As you inhale, let your hands come up. As you exhale, you're letting them softly drop down towards the floor, letting your chest follow as you exhale. Inhale, we're bringing it right back up. Nice exhale. With each one, we're squeezing into it a little further without forcing it. And again, I'm keeping this knee actively pressed down throughout this movement. Notice if you start to feel that stretch kind of in the glute of that elevated hip. Again, 5 up to 10 easy reps. And then we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. Nice inhale. Again, active knee pressing down. Exhale, let those hands fall to the floor, chest follows. Inhale, coming back up nice and tall. Exhale, fold forward. Again, notice the difference, one side compared to the other. These imbalances in the hips are really important to develop a good awareness of, because without an awareness, we can't work on improving it. And these are things that, if there's a significant imbalance in the hips, they need to be worked on every day. So after 5 to 10 reps, we're going to go ahead and move the chair back out to the side, and we're going to come down onto the floor. And we're going to get into our figure, or our quadruped position. Spreading fingers out nice and wide, grounding palms. Elbows are actively extended, and I want the back toes lightly tucked. We're going to start on our wrist mobility. Now, since we've already done a good amount of upper body work, wrists may feel a little better than they normally do when we start with our wrists. So elbows nice and extended. Inhale, on the exhale, we're just lightly rocking forward. Inhale, we're coming back. And just feeling into that wrist space. Exhale, rock forward. And again, I want this to be a squeeze. We're squeezing into that movement. We're not forcing it. I'm not using a lot of momentum. I'm doing 5 up to 10 reps. Notice the difference of the right side compared to the left side. Next, we're going to turn fingers out to the side, and we're going to get into our nice side-to-side glide. And I want to see how much can I feel my shoulder blade move across my upper back as I get into one wrist and then the other. I want to feel that nice mobility of the wrist, but I also want to feel how much can I get that shoulder blade active, moving across the rib cage. This is where I like to have that nice push and pull through the palms. One palm is actively pulling as the other is pushing back and forth. The more I'm able to get that action of the palms, the more I'm able to feel my shoulder blades active on my rib cage. Next, we'll turn fingers all the way back towards the knees. Loaded palms. Closer the hands are, the less intense this is. I don't want this to be massively intense. Palms stay loaded as we lightly rock back, hips to heels. Again, I want to squeeze into the end range. I don't want to force it. I'm not trying to I'm not pushing into pain, and I'm not pushing into a maximum stretch on any of these movements. I'm simply loading the joint space and then unloading the joint space. And kind of, assessing where is my body at. I am not trying to make my body move better right now. I am more assessing where is my body actually moving well and where is it moving poorly. Next, we're going to flip the palms up to the back side, allowing the elbows to bend. Pushing through the palms lightly into the floor. Extend the elbows to see if you feel some stretch at the elbows, and then allow the elbows to soften. With each one, squeeze a little further into that stretch of the elbows. Again, I don't want this to be massively intense, but I do want to notice if one elbow is tighter than the other, then that is a really, really big deal. Again, I don't want to force it. If you're able to get elbows fully extended, then we can do a little bit of rocking back hips to heels. Being really soft and subtle. Again, 5 to 10 reps. And then we can come off our wrists, roll them out a little bit, get a little flow back into them. And then we're going to put our focus into our feet. Coming back to our palms, tucking the toes, I want heels parallel. I want to make sure the heels are not turned out. And get the toes tucked underneath so that you can just especially feel the big toes of both feet tucked underneath, so that as you sit back, you can feel the weight of your hips load into that big toe joint. Inhale, we're going to come back up. Exhale, we're going to rock back into it and squeeze into the big toe. I want to feel that load of the big toe, then go into a load of the arch of the foot. As we're doing this extra slow, extra cautiously, making sure that we're not pushing into pain. Notice if one side feels a little stiffer and achier than the other side. Are you able to go as far? Do you have a bigger stretch through the arch of the foot? Again, nice, slow breath allows us to get into that joint space a little bit more, but I want to squeeze into it. I'm not forcing it. It's a light squeeze without force. Next, we're going to allow our heels now to turn out and see if we can get our pinky toe tucked underneath. So I'm trying to get all the way out. A lot of people, this is going to be really difficult to get that pinky toe to be on the floor and to be in extension on the floor. This may take a little while to get that foot mobility to catch up. And I have some other foot mobility drills that can help speed this up. So same thing, sinking our hips back to heels, feeling the load of our hips into the joint of the ball of the foot. Inhale, coming forward. Exhale, softening and squeezing into that end range. How does this feel on the left side compared to the right side? After 5 to 10 reps, let your heels come straight back up to parallel, and we're going to come back in and recheck the big toe again. And at this point, let's kind of go back and forth. As you come up out of your rock, you're going to load into the big toe joint. As you come up, then you're going to let your heels roll out and load into the pinky joint. And going back and forth. Now we're going to let our ankles go nice and flat. We're going to do the same thing, sitting back, hips to heels. At this point, I'm just kind of feeling into the front of the ankle space. Do the ankles feel elevated off the floor? Are they able to get a little bit flat? Do you feel some stretch in the front of the ankle space? Is it greater on the right side compared to the left? Also notice your knees. Do the knees feel smooth? Are they grindy? Are they tracking smoothly? Is one stiff, hard to bend compared to the other? If you're able to get your hips all the way back to heels, you can then slowly see if you can sit up and load all the way into a deep kneel sit, and then moving all the way back out to hands. These movements may appear really simple and subtle, but doing 5 to 10 reps of some of these movements, especially just gliding forward and backwards through the knees, can be really, really beneficial for the joints, and we can build other kind of movements into it. All right, we're going to switch into our shin box. I'm in my left side shin box, so the left palm is coming down to the floor next to the hip, spiraling that elbow out. Feel the chest kind of open up and ground the shoulder blade down into the palm of the hand. I want to keep the shoulders fairly fixed as we move our back knee and hip. We're going to lift that knee up towards the ceiling and then let it soften back down. Exhale as you lift. And again, I'm squeezing my knee up. I don't want to just throw momentum into that leg. It's And I'm only going as high as I comfortably can, getting some nice mobility into this hip socket. With each one, we're seeing if we can squeeze a little higher. You can even put your hand up here as a guide to see, can I touch, squeeze into that hand. Notice how much you'll be able to open up that hip, because we want to compare this to the other side. This needs to be non-painful. If this is at all painful, then you're going too far and you need to back off. And then we're going to shin box through to the other side. Just a nice little windshield wiper across. Round the right palm, spiral the elbow. Feel that palm and shoulder blade grounding down, lifting up the chest and sternum to the ceiling, and starting to play with opening up that back hip, that left hip now. Exhale as you squeeze. Start small and slowly work to bigger. That first few reps don't need to be huge. We're slowly squeezing into that end range to see if we can improve the quality of the movement without forcing it. Notice if this side is tighter than the other side. Get a nice slow squeeze. You can use that hand as a guide. Can I bring that knee up to that hand? And this is a good kind of guide, because if you did it on the other side, you now have a sense of comparison. Does this hip open up as much as the other one? Does it feel tighter as you're doing so? Is there a difference in the range of motion available from one side to the other? If there is a difference, then that is a sign of an imbalance, of mobility imbalance in the hips. And that is definitely something we want to work on. We're going to bring it back, shin box back to the other side. Grounding palms. Now I want to get into our anterior hip. Inside of the knee is our pivot point. Moving that hip bone forward and letting it soften. This back hip has to come up off the floor as we lift it up. It's actually kind of rolling over the top of my other hip. And I want to feel into this stretch through the front of the hip. Length, stretch, it doesn't need to be a lot. I just want to feel it getting longer here. Inhale as you let it soften. Exhale as you squeeze into it. And I want this to be a squeeze, because the more I squeeze that hip bone forward, the more I'm going to feel my glute literally squeeze and contract. I want to feel that contraction from that glide forward. I don't want to intentionally contract the glute. I want to see if I can get as much movement forward and feel that glute really get nice and locked in. I get full glute contraction through this hip. Or does it feel really tight and I'm not able to get there? We'll shin box across to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing. Pivoting through that knee, gliding that hip bone forward. Oh, and this is my tight side. It's tighter right off the bat. So exhale, squeeze into it. Again, I want to stay light with the squeeze to start with, and with each one, we're seeing if we can move a little further into it. This side is much tighter. I am struggling. I can start to feel my glute getting tight, but it's not as easy as it was on the other side. There's a lot more tension here. If I were to force this, it would be painful. So I'm going even slower into my squeeze. And I'm even, on my softening, I'm going slower. I'm going slower just in and out of this movement altogether. The more I'm getting into it, the further I'm getting out of it. I'm starting to feel that glute contracting a little bit more. And then we're going to go ahead and shin box it through to the other side. We're going to do the same movement, but we're going to add to it. So gliding that hip bone forward. Feel that nice move, that stretch. Let's do 5 of these again. Since we're coming back to the same movement, you may notice it's a little freer. If you got a little bit more ease to the movement, you can get a little further into it. On the fifth one, I want to add to it. As we glide that hip bone forward, this is where I like to imagine we got bread, and we got a buddy, we got my skeletor over there, and I want to share some bread with him. Seeing how long can I get from that back knee, pushing into the floor, all the way out to my fingertips. Inhale, letting it all soften. Exhale, reach through that knee, extend the hip, and rotate. On this, I want to watch out for dropping my chest and my shoulders forward. I'm not trying to reach this way. I'm keeping the height of my spine. I'm still locked into my shoulders. So I'm really spiraling over this back hand and then reaching. I can get nice and extension through that shoulder, upper back as I reach the fingertips. And I want to really feel that continuous stretch from the knee, front of the hip, into my low back, up to my shoulders, all the way out to the fingertips. And then we'll switch across and do the same thing on the other side. So again, lock in that elbow, that palm, shoulder. We're going to do our hip extensions, 5 of them again to start with. On this left hip, feels better the second time around. I'm getting much further into the range. Still tighter, but I got more range, and I can feel my glute. So on the fifth one, as we reach, now we got our bread, and we're spiraling across to see if we can share that bread. Man, this whole range right here, through that hip on this side, so much tighter, so much less range of motion, a lot more restriction. Again, this is all related to having 5 knee surgeries on my right knee, 1 knee surgery on my left knee. I have some significant structural imbalances in my body that my body is constantly compensating for. So I have to do these movements every day in order to maintain the level of dysfunction that I have and to prevent that dysfunction from getting worse. I'm going to bring it back to the other side. Now I want to get into our side body. So instead of having my knee side hand down, I'm actually bringing that arm up, bending the elbow across, and I want to lift that elbow like I'm trying to touch the ceiling with just my elbow, feeling the shoulder blades slide up and then slide down on the rib cage. So you have that nice free shoulder blade. Exhale as you lift and squeeze that lift. Inhale, let it soften. With each one, as you're lifting and squeezing that elbow up, start to root down, pressing down through that hip. And see if we can get nice and long from the elbow through the back of the side of the shoulder into the side body of the low back. As we reach down, can you feel all of this side of the body, up into the ribs, up into the posterior shoulder, to that elbow. Get nice and long. If that's feeling pretty good and not overly intense, now we're going to come back to this one. We'll go to the other side, and let's do the other side. I want to add a rep in first before I add that next layer. So arm comes up, elbow bent, starting out with just, can you feel the shoulder blades sliding up and down? If you're finding it difficult to slide one shoulder compared to the other, that's going to be a big deal. So that's going to be something that we want to talk about. How do we get those shoulders to move more freely? If the shoulder's not moving freely, it is being locked into other patterns of core stability that are preventing your shoulder from functioning in its own, and that's going to create some problems. So we want to work those compensation patterns out a little bit. As we're getting this nice slide up and down, we can start to root down through that hip into the floor, seeing how long can we get through that side body. Can you feel that nice, long, continuous stretch from through the hip all the way up to the elbow? And then we'll switch back across to the other side. And we're going to start with the exact same thing, reaching down, lifting up. Now, as I'm reaching down, lifting up, I don't want to drop my opposite shoulder. I'm not lowering my shoulder. I want it to stay at the same level, but I am elevating this opposite one as I get long through this side of the body. And the part that I want to now add in is I want to come back to that hip, that back hip, reaching forward, pivoting through the knee. Let that hip reach forward. Now we're also reaching down to the opposite hip as we lift up. So I got 3 movements all at once. Back hip goes forward, same side hip goes down as the elbow goes up. This will elicit a little bit more length through this back leg into that side body stretch. And we'll switch that across and do the same thing on the other side. Again, starting with our reaching down, reaching up, feeling that big length. And then adding in, can we reach that back hip forward as we get nice and long. And I can feel that really getting into that tension in that left hip, especially when I combine all these movements. I'm getting a lot more mobility into this back hip with all these other components added in. That felt really good. We'll switch back to the other side. Now we're going to get into our folds. I want to bring our folds kind of focused on the shin today. Normally I'll focus on the knee as the arrow, but instead I want to try to stay somewhat square with my front leg shin. So I'm simply just reaching straight forward with both hands, dropping my chest through the square shin. Inhale, bringing it all the way back up. And let's go ahead and bring this across to the other side. So as we come across, we can do our windshield wipers. Again, square to the shin as we reach forward. Bringing it back, windshield wiper across to the other side. As we're going back and forth, start to notice how does it feel on one side compared to the other. Can you feel more stretch through the front of the back hip, or do you feel it more through the glute space of the front hip on one side compared to the other? Do you feel more stretch in your low back or shoulders as you're going back and forth? Again, I want to squeeze into our end range, not forcing it, but with each one, seeing if we can go a little bit further. And as we're going, I now want to start to open up that back leg a little bit more on each one. I'm still focusing on the shin, staying square to the shin, which is going to elicit some interesting mobility stuff in our hips. So I want to just be soft and sensitive to it. Notice it. How does it feel when you do it on the right side with your hips opened up to the same amount as it does on the left side? I feel this a lot more in that left hip, that back hip on my right side than I do in my right hip on the left side. And again, with each one, we're slowly opening up that back hip, but we're still reaching through that square shin of the leg that's in front. And I want to take this through until we get closer and closer to what we would consider a yoga class pigeon pose. Although I'm not overly concerned about finding that end range nature of the pigeon, I'm more interested in the exploration of everything else in between it. If you're able to get into a nice full range pigeon without pain or discomfort, then that is great, but that is not my goal. I'm more interested in quality of movement than I am in end range movements. And one of the biggest things is you're in, however far you're able to go on the right, do we have the same degree of balance on the left? And balance being not just range of motion, but also the quality of that range of motion. Is it smooth? Is it efficient? Is it clunky? Is it grindy? Is there neurological control of it? Do you have good stability? So just because we can achieve a position doesn't mean that we can do it well. All right, so now we're going to get onto our back and we're going to go through some baby rolls. So letting the legs go nice and flat to the floor. Arms are going to come up into kind of a nice Y shape so that the elbows can remain softly on the floor. And I want to start by, we're going to allow ourselves to push through our heels in order to reach across our body with our hands. See how far can you reach across without pain in the low back. Inhale, bringing it all the way back and then we're going to lightly push through that heel to reach across. And with each one, we're slow, we're seeing how far can we reach with keeping that heel in contact with the floor. I want that heel kind of active today. I'm actively pushing the heel down as I'm actively reaching fingertips away. And as we're getting into this with each one, as you reach, once you get across with your reach, you're reaching through those fingertips. You can also kind of reach through that toe tip of the side that's pressing down. How long can you get your right fingers away from your right toes? Getting nice and long. Can you feel that through the shoulder, down into the back, into the hips, as a nice, long, continuous stretch? I don't want it to feel like a massive stretch. I don't want it to feel stressful. It should not be painful. Then we'll come back to center. Arms are still overhead. And now we're going to reach across with the legs. But I want to maintain some pressure with the back of the palm on the side that's down. So I'm keeping my palm pressed down as I lift and reach across with my leg, allowing my hip to rotate. I want to keep the leg high. Don't let it drop down to the floor. So I'm kind of almost reaching up in a way as if I'm putting my foot up onto a couch or a bed or a shelf. Inhale as you come back to center. Press the palm into the back of the palm into the floor as you reach across with the foot. Start slow, start small. With each one, squeeze those toes, reaching out a little further. Trying to see how much length can we get from fingertips to toe tips throughout the structures of the body. Again, I'm keeping some pressure downwards to the back of the palm as I'm reaching across. I want to move with my breath. I want to pay attention to breath holding. If you're finding that you're kind of holding your breath, especially at the end range, then I would back off. Don't go so far. Make sure that you can access. Nice inhale, nice exhale throughout the movement. Then we're going to flip over onto our belly. Arms are coming up straight to the side if you can. If shoulders are too tight for this, arms can come out a little bit. But I want to keep those elbows pulling as tight to the ears as possible. We're going to lift that elbow up. Again, I want it staying short or tight to the ear. I want to prevent that arm from coming out to the side. I can move a whole lot at my shoulder without moving my spine. And I'm not worried about, we've already done a lot of shoulder work today, so I want to move the spine more than the shoulder. So the closer that elbow is to the ear as you're lifting up, there's only so far it'll go. and then it's going to roll your shoulder over. Now I'm going to, as we're doing this part, I'm working my right arm. I want to feel my left knee pressed into the floor. So I'm pushing that knee down as I'm lifting, and I'm keeping that knee in contact with the floor and seeing how far can I roll, almost trying to look up to the ceiling, bringing it back and doing the same thing on the other side. Press that knee into the floor as you lift the elbow, keeping that elbow tight as you can to the ear. I want to make sure that we are avoiding pain. With each one, we're slowly squeezing into it a little further. Notice if you're able to go further on the right side than you are on the left side. Whenever we do baby rolls, we're kind of doing a pretty direct assessment of our gait mechanics through our core, especially related to spinal mobility. So if you have significant imbalances on one side on any of these movements, that's going to be a pretty significant issue when it comes to our gait. All right, our last movement of the baby rolls, we're going to let our hands come straight out to the side with the palms down. You're going to bend one knee. You're going to see if you can lift that heel up to the ceiling. And then bringing it back down. Then we'll do the same thing with the other side. Bend the knee. Can you press that heel straight up to the ceiling? And then back down. And we'll do a few of these. Now notice as you're bending one foot, the opposite knee, slightly push that knee into the floor as you're lifting that heel. Now I only want you to go as high as you feel comfortable. If this is painful, then I want you to stop, and this is an area where I want you to contact me. If this is not painful, we can take this to the next level. So as you lift that heel, now can you roll your hips as if you're trying to place that foot to the floor, but only going as far as you can without your shoulder lifting up off the floor. So can you rotate across, bringing it back down, and then same thing on the other side. Lift the heel first and rotate across. Don't allow that shoulder to come up. In fact, let's add a little pressure into the shoulder. So I'm bending my right heel, lifting that knee up. I'm pushing my right shoulder lightly into the floor and maintaining that pressure as I rotate the hips. I want to make sure that this is not painful on the back and that we are squeezing slowly. I want good control of our body. This should feel good and juicy, not stressful and painful. And then we can go ahead and roll over onto our back. And we're going to finish with a little bit of crocodile breath. So making our big C shapes with our hands, placing those hands below the ribs and above the pelvis in that nice meaty abdominal core section, and squeezing in so that your index finger is pressing into the front abdominals, the side palms pressing into that side body space, and your thumbs are pressing into your low back. And I want a good even squeeze. We're going to breathe in through the nose, and I want to fill up that abdominal space and feel that crocodile breath, that 360 balloon breath pressing out in all 6 of those points at the exact same time. Feel that forced air pressing out. Exhale, we're drawing navel into spine and squeezing our hands in as we let our breath out so that we have some resistance to our inhale. And again, feel that inhale pressing into all 6 points of contact, 3 on each hand. Index fingers, palm, and thumb. And if you're feeling that one of those little areas is not inflating or expanding well, then bring the focus of your breath into that space and see if you can get it to move. Can you get it to open up? We'll do 5 up to 10. Nice full inhale, full exhale. Then you can allow your hands to relax, close your eyes, and take another few breaths, another minute or so of just nice inhales, nice exhales, taking a scan. As you inhale, allow that breath to come up into your neck, up into the chest, expanding out, noticing any areas where there's some tension. Let that breath fill that tension in, and on the exhale, see if that tension can release and be melted away down into the floor. If you're noticing like there's one particular area of tension, and focus that breath to that area, just shining a nice little light on it. Feel it expand. Breathe into that tension and then see if you can allow that tension to release and just melt away into the floor. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes.